Welcome back, everyone, for the third episode of the Strength Institute podcast. We've got a special guest on today, someone who's a part of Australian sporting history. We've got Jim Milisavljevic, who was actually a member of the first ever Australian team to play in the Soccer World Cup back in '74. So first of all, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast, Jim. I appreciate your time.
That's not a problem. Anytime that we can help.
Fantastic. Now, before we get into the podcast, I just want to set something out for some continuity.
Yep.
Depending on where you hail from, soccer or football, what are we going to call it today?
What are we going to call today? Well, whichever you want.
All right. Well, let's go with soccer then. That's what I'm used to here in Australia. So we'll go with soccer today.
Not a problem.
Yeah. So first of all, how did you get started into soccer? Was it sort of a big sport based in your community, or did it just spark an interest with you personally, or how did you get into it?
A bit hard to say. When I was at school, you didn't play soccer at school.
Okay.
I played Aussie rules. So I was playing Aussie rules for quite a while at school. Worked my way through to the Carlton Football Club Colts or under 16 team. But at the same time as I was doing that, I was also with my friends and that playing soccer. So I was playing soccer, footy in the morning and then soccer in the afternoon. And all of a sudden it came to a time to make a decision as to what way I was going to go. And I thought I'll give the soccer part a big push. And it turned out the best decision that I made, really.
Right. And how old were you when you first started playing soccer? And then and you said you were under 16s when you decided to go full time into the soccer.
That's right. I started off, what was I, around about 10.
10?
Playing both, Aussie rules and soccer. And then I made the decision to go across to soccer more so. And then about 6 months or 12 months after making that decision, I made my first appearance in the club team in the firsts, in the seniors. When I was 16 and a half, just going on to 17. And then from there, I made a decision to drop the Aussie rules part and stuck with the soccer, and everything took off from there.
And so you're saying you're playing first grade. What club was that?
That's with the club no longer around, but it was called Footscray JUST. It was one of the strongest clubs in Victoria at that time. During that period of me playing in the seniors from 69 through to 75, we won 3 championships, 3 knockout cup competitions in a row, and plus the Ampol Cup, which was a night competition. So it was a pretty productive, 5 years or so.
A busy club there.
Yeah.
And what was club soccer like in Victoria growing up? I mean, you see in England they have football hooligans, they have riots and people fighting. And in Brazil it's so serious people sometimes get killed over it. I mean, what was it like growing up in Melbourne and the atmosphere of soccer in the community?
Back in that time, to try and make a comparison with you, once the A-League started here, everyone said, "Oh, fantastic, we're getting 15, 20 odd thousand people come and watch games." When I was playing, the teams that we had were all natural. How would you want to put it? You had Juventus, which was an Italian team, Hellas, a Greek team, and so on. So everyone had their own nationality team that they could have.
So the teams were very much sort of community based with whatever ethnicity was in the area?
That's correct. And then amongst that, you would have the odd fight. We would have our fights with the team Melbourne Knights or Melbourne Croatia at that time because of the ethnic rubbish and everything else, which I don't want to go into.
Sure.
But if you had the proper 2 teams playing in the final or even in the league games, we were getting anywhere between 10 to 15,000 people coming.
That's a great result for club soccer or any club sport, really.
Well, it was because back then you had players that were coming from overseas that didn't quite make it overseas, but they were a lot better, so they had a second chance here. And they grabbed it with both hands and made names. And so the football that or the soccer we were playing back then was just as good as what, or if not, some of us think even better than what's being played now. We were playing the balls down. We weren't knocking long balls in the air and just having a bash type of thing. It was all controlled games.
Technical soccer.
Yeah, just knocking the ball about and that. So the spectators that came were all immigrants that came over, and they found the teams from the countries that they came to. They had teams here they supported, so that's what gave us that majority of the support of being up to around the 10, 15,000 at certain games, and that's it was a good outcome. And then after that, the game after 75, the game seemed to drop a little bit and it got lost, if you want to put it that way. Then the National League started. They had success with that at the beginning, and then that started to fall off a bit. And then started the headaches of not having the World Cup qualification and getting to the World Cup after the 74 team. It took another 32 years before we qualified again, which shouldn't have been that long. But unfortunately, that's how long it took.
And we'll get into the World Cup stuff in a little bit, but why do you think it took so long between drinks? Is it the structure of soccer in Australia? Was it sort of how the club systems were laid out? Was it coaching? Was it just lack of interest from the public? What do you think?
I think a bit of all round. I think soccer is still not at a level where it should be. I think we miss a lot with our juniors, even though they're starting to come up. But there is that gap between players that finish at the age of 16 or 18 and not really getting a chance of playing in the seniors. Whether or not we go back to the old thing of coaches covering their backside in a way, because if the results are not there, they're shown the door type of thing. So they're sticking with some of the older players too much. I think we need to really give our juniors a go. We have quite a few juniors, even back early 80s and that, we had juniors playing overseas. And that we've got them out even now we've got them overseas. I don't think there's enough international games for them. I think now with the way the A-League is being played at the moment, I think to me it's dropped off the standard to a certain extent. We've only now basically, even though it's a 10-team league, which to me is too small, I think we should have at least 14 in there. I find it funny that we've got a team from New Zealand playing in our league who play in a completely different zone for when it comes to qualifications. Where we were together in Oceania, then we moved to Asia. New Zealand stayed in Oceania, but they're playing in our league here, which I don't think is really right. I just think it needs really a good shake-up needs to be done.
Okay, I can definitely see some comparisons drawn between rugby and soccer. Then in that case, about 20 years experience through the club rugby system, and pathways are hard because you see a big drop off between school and club and Colts, and then you see again a big drop off between Colts and first grade or grade rugby, and now especially with losing the Western Force a couple of years ago, you just lose that pathway. If any of the boys want to make it, they have to fly over east, and even though there's teams over there in soccer, I can see that finding that sweet spot as a pathway between school and club and first grade into a national team is really important structure you need to have down, and it takes time to build that. So that's interesting that crosses multiple sports there.
I think you'll find that with most sports and juniors, but especially with soccer is being held back maybe because of its reputation, or people just don't like it as it is. It makes it hard, but when you look at the junior registrations and apparently everything is skyrocketing and that, but we definitely we're losing quality juniors when they should be stepping up in the senior teams.
Yeah, I think in terms of player registration, soccer actually for a winter sport is one of the highest because it has quite a high female and male player rate, especially in the junior ages compared with sports like rugby league and union, which is more male oriented. So you lose a lot of population in terms of developing those players. But yeah, I see what you mean. Saying there's definitely a drop off in transitioning them through the different skill levels. I'd like to get a bit more into you and sort of your experiences. You said when you were 16 was when you started playing first grade, or 16 and a half, you're playing first grade for your club.
Yep.
And what position were you playing majority of?
As a junior, I played anywhere, really. But then I settled on goalkeeping. Part of the reason was because of the expertise and that, if you want to put it, that I picked up from playing Aussie rules, marking the ball. So if I could mark an oval-shaped ball, a round ball's a piece of cake afterwards. Learned how to defend myself going up high. Use of the body, use of the knee, use of turning a little bit so you're not being left wide open to be hit. Because when I was playing, it's not like it is now. When I was playing, it was more of goalkeeper was a fair game. Once that ball was in the air, inside the area, it was on for young and old. And I enjoyed it. I got on well with the strikers that hit me. They hit me and I hit them back, but that's where it stayed on the park. And once we went off, we were the first ones having a drink in the sheds and that. So
that's the way it should be.
Well, that's it. You're out there playing, and what happens out on the field, you leave it on the field.
100% agree. Actually, the thumbnail for this podcast is a picture of you diving just completely parallel with the ground, making a good save. So you'll see that when the podcast gets uploaded.
Yeah, well, back in that time, there wasn't too many photographers around, and someone taking movies and that. So we didn't get all that much publicity. We hit the headlines once when we qualified for the World Cup. It took off, and for that 6-week period, soccer was number one. Once that was over, it went back to the normal situation of about page 8 from the back, tucked away just before the obituaries and that, I think it was.
What was your pathway from first grade soccer at your club to the Australian team? Is it tryouts? Do you have scouts that are watching the games? How did you progress through to the national team?
Well, I started to during that period that I mentioned, from 69 through to 75. I was starting to reach a good enough form to attract a bit of interest from the selectors of the state team and of the national team. The coach who put me in to be a goalkeeper just so happened to be Riley Russage, who was coach of the Australian team. He was one who gave me the opportunity to go into goals and to progress from there. Then I started to make moves from the junior representative teams, from the state teams, under 16s through to under 21, where I captained the under 21 Victorian team. Then was called in for trials with the national team. Got selected into there. Was lucky enough to be with the Australian team through 73 when we actually qualified in Hong Kong, and then on to 74. we were at the World Cup. We played the World Cup, came back. Then I think within a week of being back, I was on the plane again, going with the under-23 Australian team back to Thailand for a tournament there.
In terms of qualifying, especially for those that aren't familiar with the process, is it the same then as it is now to qualify for the World Cup? Or what sort of qualifying process did you go through in '73?
We had to play. Our zone was broken up in 72, 73 was broken up into Zone A, Zone B. So then your winners would meet off afterwards. So we'd won our group. So we had to go in to play against. We played against Iran. We'd already played 6 games because you play on a home and away basis. So we topped our group, and so we were off to play Iran. We beat them here 3-0 in Sydney. We went to Iran to play over there. What was it? About 115,000 Iranians in the crowd, and just a few of us sitting on the bench. We got through that. We lost 2-0, but because we scored more goals, we qualified for the next stage, which was against South Korea. We played them in Sydney. We drew 0-0 in Sydney. Went to South Korea. We played them over there. In the first half, South Korea were up 2-0. Second half, we came back and equalised, so it was 2-2. But back then, there was no away goal rule, where the away goal counts as double. So FIFA said we have to go off and play a third game. So they took us to Hong Kong, and then the night, November the 13th, back in '73, and is when Jimmy Mackay had scored the goal from, distance gets further and further, but we were all happy to give him the 30 metres into the top corner, which put us through to the World Cup in '74. There was a newspaper article that came out in one of the German newspapers back then, before the tournament had started, of who are these people that are coming in to play in this world stage? Who's allowed them to come in? Basically calling us yobbos and the rest of it. At the end of the tournament, they retracted all that and apologised, because we were drawn in basically the hardest group of the lot, because we had East Germany, West Germany and Chile. After our performances in those 3 games, they came back and wrote that apology in the newspaper and wished us all the best for future tournaments and that. So we'd built up a good reputation of being a very tight and working group together. We would back each other to the hilt. Didn't matter what was going on, we all stood together as one. So you could rely on whoever. If someone was taking your place, you knew straight away he was going to give it the same 110%. And that's just the way it was back then with us. We had we were all part-timers. None of us had work. You had to go to work during the day, put in a full day's work, go to train of an evening. You train 2 nights a week, 3 nights if you played on a Sunday. Your training would be about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then you'd go off to work and then come back to training again, the following day type of thing. With the World Cup, training standards were completely different. We were then becoming, when we were in camp, we were then full-time professionals then. We were training 3 times a day. Each session was anything up to 2.5 hours per session. But we really put the hard yards in, built our stamina up, our standards up, and that's why we end up getting such a good reputation when we were overseas. And everyone that backed us, you know.
Yeah, I'd love to pick your brain on what those trainings were like. I mean, I'm sure it's really different now than it was back then. I mean, was it mainly field training? Did you get into the gym? Was there strength and conditioning components, or was it really just drilling down the technique, drilling down the core skills? What was it like?
It was all the training that we did was basically running and knocking the ball around.
Yeah.
There was no weights, nothing like that. Our coach would say we're going to do a what was it, a 12-minute run, I think it was, he used to call it. And he said, right, everyone will follow Manfred. Manfred Schaefer was a German who had moved here, ended up playing with Australia and that. The only thing I didn't know at that particular stage was that Manfred Schaefer used to be a milkman. So we had the old horse and cart and that, and he used to do all the running, delivering the milk. So we would lead the pack out on this 12-minute run, 6 minutes, and then he would turn around. So all you saw was just this little figure that was going out further and further, and then you wait for it to come back bigger and bigger. So as soon as you saw it getting bigger, you knew you had to turn around to head back again, and he'd still go past you. You know. Other than that, it was all just basically technique, knocking the ball around, suicide runs, bit of middle distance running, and that just to build the stamina up in our legs, and so that we could play a full 90 minutes at a certain speed and not tire off. So, but weight-wise and that, there was nothing. The only weight that we had was a medicine ball, and that was it. You know, everything else was basically just normal routine. No weights, no people coming in and telling you you need to do this and that. The only thing that we saw which was different, and which a lot of them are using now, is someone to come in to have a talk to you, just to get into your mind and that. But other than that, there was nothing really outstanding with our training sessions.
Just hard work.
Just hard work. You know, and it's proven fact. Without the hard work, you don't get anywhere. You know, it's, sometimes I do some one-on-one work with young goalkeepers, and I may repeat the same situation or diving movement with that player. I may go over that 15 times until it becomes a natural sort of thing with him. So
skill mastery, very important, just to get that repetition in.
Yeah, well, basically is to give him the fundamentals, the grounding, give him a solid table to work from. And if he can get that, and I'd say it's the same with you with lifting weights and that, if you can get them into that proper position, that they know automatically that they're standing in a proper position under the bar, how they're lifting and that all comes natural to them, and they just continue just doing that. It's just continuous repetition of that work until it's just second nature. They don't even think about it anymore. They automatically do it. And this is what I've got to do, and that's what I do with young goalkeepers. I try and teach them that, give them the proper foundations of how they're going to get further ahead. You know, and then after that, it's up to them. It's hard work. You know, and it might be just a little centimetre, 2 centimetres here, or you know, whether you've got your hands too far back, or they're too far, or they're not, you know, the way they should be. Once they get into those proper positions, you know, anything can happen. You know, so I think it's basically the same as what would happen, you know, if you in your field, you'd be passing on.
Yes. Small things make a big difference in the long run, and and effort over time is hugely important.
Yeah. Well, I think that's basically in any sport, or any, maybe not even. I wouldn't say just sport. I'd say in life in general. All of that helps. You can go through situations where you need to fall back onto that mental strength that you've got between, if you've got that between your ears, that mental strength, you can pretty well overcome anything that comes your way, be it good or bad. You either improve on what you've already got, or you can overcome something that's bad and put yourself into a lot better position. And I think that it doesn't matter whether that's in sport or in life in general. If you can get yourself to be mentally strong, you can overcome anything. And not worry about the past or be hindered by something that's not working the way it should be.
No, I think that's great advice. If we then proceed through after the World Cup finished, you all came back. You did some more tournaments under 23s, I think you said. What about injuries? You had some injuries after the World Cup?
Yes, I broke my wrist. So I was sitting on the bench for a while. This is back here in club games. Then the coach of the club team, we were playing the final of this night competition, the World Cup, back in '75. When he asked me if I was okay, I said, yeah, I'm okay. He said, well, I'll put you on the bench in case I need you and that. I said, yeah, that's fine, not a problem. The game gets underway, and we've gone the first half 0-0, we've gone second half 0-0. And the extra time starts, because we've got to go through extra time and penalties to decide the winner. So we've started off the extra time, and he's asked me to start to warm up. So I'm thinking to myself, why am I warming up? Maybe he wants me to be in goal for the penalties. So I warmed myself up, and he said, right, take the shirt off. So I've taken another shirt off someone else. And he said, now you're going to go on. I want you to do what you do at training. And I was out on the park for about 5 minutes and scored a goal. Put us 1-0 up, and that's how it stayed. So we won the final 1-0. What most people didn't know, as a junior, I'd played as a striker and also as a defender. So at training, I used to do the same thing, and the coach knew this. So I would go earlier to do the goalkeeper training or stay later, but I would do my training as a player as well. So, and I had a bit of speed. Anything, on the first 5 to 10 metres, no one would be able to catch me, and that's what came into this when I scored the goal. So after that, I retired, took up refereeing, became a qualified referee, refereed for a couple of years, and then they brought in the age limit on referees. So that stopped me because I couldn't progress any further. I wasn't allowed to referee at a higher level.
So you played first grade, you represented your country, you came back, you became a qualified referee, but then you weren't old enough to referee.
Well, I was too old to referee.
Oh, too old to referee?
Yeah, I was going to be too old to referee, and I wouldn't be able to get to a certain level, to the senior levels. I was doing some of the senior games, but then it meant I wouldn't be able to go any further. But, I'd start to be dropping back, and I thought, well, that's a waste. I didn't want to do that. So I stopped there. I was on the committee with the referees committee at that time. Then I retired from them. Then went and started to do coaching. Did that for a few years. Stopped there, and then became one of the officials. Ended up being a commissioner of the federation. So basically, I've done virtually everything there is to be done, from playing to right around to administration and a whole lot together.
if you had to pick one thing in your career, uh, what's the biggest highlight to you? Is it scoring last-minute goals? Is it doing the green and gold for your country? What's the number one highlight in your playing career?
Well, I think it'd have to be being part of the first team that ever made the World Cup.
Yeah.
Because we were part-timers. A lot of us lost our jobs over it. But it was the honour of wearing the green and gold and being at the World Cup, even though we were there. I do not think we knew exactly what we had achieved. And even today, I think we still think about it at times. And then what annoyed us was that we got fed up with the wait of 32 years for another team to join us. We were just getting sick and tired of being told we're the only team. We didn't want that. We wanted soccer to progress to a level where it is now, or not to the standard it is now. I think the standard can be higher, but to where we're now qualifying for the World Cup more on a more regular basis. So, which needs to happen, but I think we also need to capitalise on that opportunity. I think there's got to be more international games. They've got to be organised some sort of to get the team together, because you can't expect to get a team together in 6 weeks and expect them to perform miracles. It's just not going to happen. Just not going to happen. We've got players overseas, but they're not playing together. And this is what we need. We need the players playing together. You need that continuity. You need that togetherness in there for them to build a relationship together. And that's not happening. That's why I think that's where we're slipping behind on what's happening here. You've got to put yourself in a position you don't think twice. You've got that honour to go out there and you do it, and they all do it. But they need the backing. They need the backing from their federations, not just for the federation to be thinking, we've done this, is going to happen again. It doesn't work like that. You've got to get something. You've got to spend the money. You've got to put the time and effort into it. And you've got to get that and give it the full 100% backing, because these players or representatives are giving in return, regardless whether you give something or not. They're giving in return. They're giving 110, 120%. And they're risking serious injuries at times, which could, as a sports person, one injury could finish your career completely.
One injury is all it takes.
That's it. It could be anything. But this is why the federations need to take accountability and look at themselves at times, and they should be asking themselves, are they doing the right thing? Or are they just protecting themselves and making their chair nice and pushy, and that's so they can sit on it and accept all the freebies and everything else? Think about the people that have put you there in that position, and think about the people that are out there wearing the green and gold and putting their life on the line, if you want to put it in a way. Because their time of sports and everything else, as we said, one injury could finish everything for them. How many mistakes do officials and that make when nothing happens? It doesn't affect them. But it affects all the sports people. That's the way I look at it more than anything else.
Sure. Well, I guess we'll finish off. I like to ask people on the podcast this, is if you had some words of advice for young players coming up, what's the most important thing that they should focus on to try to progress, any sport, but in particular to progress their soccer to the next level? What should they be doing? What should they be focusing on?
What they should be focusing on is what I mentioned earlier, getting mentally strong, getting their foundations right, preparing themselves, and knowing at the very end that they gave 100%, 110, 120%, that they don't have to think twice about that. If they do that, the door is open to them. That's about all I can say really, is that they've just got to put that work in and really push it as hard as they can, and never feel let down or betrayed or that. The work that you put in will be recognised. The work that you do has got to be more than what the person next to you is doing for you to be in front. So the only reason that someone else maybe has got the gig before you is because they put more effort in. So you've got to put more. What I used to say is, what you produced on the training ground, the way that you acted on the training and what you did at training and everything else, will be seen when you play your game, or if you're lifting weights. So it just means, to me, it means the more you put into your training and that, the more you're going to produce when you're out on the field. The more you put on in your training of weights and everything else, the more the weight you're going to lift when the time comes. So it all works out.
Effort, intensity over time.
That's it.
Fantastic. Great advice.
That's all I can say really to them, to help them more than anything else.
Well, great. Jim, I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast. I think that's been really interesting to hear that. And like I said before, you're part of an exclusive group, not only to represent your country, but in a World Cup. And not only that, the first time ever Australia qualified for a World Cup. So I really appreciate your input here today.